Now that the honeymoon stage is over, I have to be honest, and I won't sugarcoat it. Armored Core 6 is very underwhelming. Let me explain why. First off, let's start with the aspect of building your mech. I was genuinely surprised at how limited the options were for unlocking body parts as I progressed through the game. You'd expect to get extra parts as you improve your arena rank or complete sorties, just like in previous games, but unfortunately, that's not the case here. Instead, FromSoft decided that you would have to finish the game 3 times just to access the full range of parts. While the overall game is relatively short, especially once you get the hang of it, replaying the majority of the missions over and over became excessively tedious for me. To make matters worse, on my third playthrough, there's nothing new to unlock in the shops, which left me scratching my head. Why make us run through the same boring 5-minute missions again for the third time? I couldn't help but wonder why these story paths weren't available from the beginning. FromSoft's choice to artificially pad the game with repetitive missions to increase replayability and extend the overall playtime disappointed me. While I understand that this structure aligns with other games featuring alternative endings, I believe FromSoft could have handled it organically. Speaking of mech building, I couldn't help but feel disappointed by the limited variety of parts. I built a mech tailored for long range combat and hoped to find a new arm with better firearm specialization and target tracking. After completing the game for the third time, you can imagine my disappointment when I found nothing better than the arm I unlocked in early Chapter 2. This also holds true for specialized melee builds, where the best arm is unlocked after completing Chapter 2. If you're an optimist, you might argue that you start with the best part early on, but if you're a pessimist, you'd wonder if there's any point in unlocking more parts even after pouring another 50 hours into the game. When it comes to core and head selection, there's a decent variety available without the need for excessive grinding, making it possible to find one that suits your preferred playstyle. However, in the leg department, bipeds offer the most choices, which was positive for me. But if you're into reverse joints or tanks, your options are fairly limited to just 3 choices. And if you happen to be a fan of tetrapods, you're stuck with just 2 choices. Going to weapon loadouts, I would say that the weapon selection was perhaps the most disappointing aspect of the game. If you don't choose the best in class for each type, you're essentially handicapping yourself. Dual Zimmerman and dual Gatling guns made the game almost too easy since they come with no drawbacks. Pairing them with the wheelchair legs also completes this brain dead build as they outperform every other leg option in the game. Dual songbirds or stun needles also stood out as top tier weapons, but they required you to stop to fire them. I ran this setup, going from dual songbirds to dual stun needles, because these guns really pack a punch. If you're up for a challenge, you can use laser or rifle weapons on your playthrough. A couple of them are decent, but 90% are absolutely trash considering their projectile speeds. Meanwhile, missiles are fairly balanced, though they are quite oppressive with PvP, or so I've heard. I never tried PvP mainly due to the lack of matchmaking. I didn't want to crush noobs or be steamrolled. The lack of matchmaking also made it impossible to determine whether you've won due to superior build, skill, or simply facing less experienced opponents. In contrast, when I played Gundam Battle Operations 2 for over 100 hours, I knew exactly whether my wins were the result of my skill, my teammates, or just plain luck. Anyway, I'm sure some people like to curb stomp noobs in PvP, but I'm not one of those people. In terms of boss fights in Armored Core 6 are fairly challenging and gives you the rush once you beat them, especially during the first playthrough when everything felt unfamiliar. However, on the second or third run, 100% of the boss fights are a total joke since you kinda wreck them in 1 or 2 minutes. This is the primary reason why I don't play New Game Pluses. They just don't give you the same high like when you started the game. On the other hand, boss fights with additional enemies proved to be a miserable experience. The targeting system had terrible tracking, with the FCS constantly shifting between targets. Thankfully, there were only 2 instances of these encounters in the entire game, but they still left me frustrated. I couldn't understand why the game didn't offer an option for the FCS to prioritize high threat targets, especially when you're using high damage, single shot weapons. Why does the game think I need to punch an empty with a fully charged pile bunker when the boss is right beside me? In conclusion, Armored Core 6 is a decent game, but It falls short of pushing the boundaries of mech games or even the Armored Core series in general. FromSoft had 10 years to innovate on the series, but all we got was a new set of paint. I'm baffled all we got is such a basic mech game after all this waiting. Still, Armored Core 6 received the highest score in the series, though I suspect that the game got high scores primarily because most reviewers are either diehard fans of the franchise or some fear missing out on the early access to FromSoft's future Souls-like games. Overall, I'd place Armored Core 6 below a fully modded MechWarrior 5 in terms of PvE and below Gundam Battle Operations 2 in terms of PvP, mainly due to the lack of matchmaking.